Well, it's so important to center our men and women in uniform, especially in a situation like this. Volatility now in the Asia Pacific, in Ukraine and Europe, in the Middle East, including just in the last few days in Syria. We need leaders, cabinet secretaries that are serious, qualified, nonpartisan, and I mean just the coverage of Mr. Hegseth. It's incredibly concerning, and I think this should not be seen through the partisan lens. Unqualified, unexperienced, unserious, and now a growing mountain, I should say, of evidence to be concerned about. Will a few Republican senators not behave as partisans, but actually act as patriots here and think about our troops?
That's Congressman Pat Ryan, a veteran himself, talking about the nomination of Pete Hegseth to be the Secretary of Defense. I'm Fred Wellman, host of On the Line with VoteVets. We're back live once again here in 2025. We're thrilled to be back with you. Our producer JJ and I have been trying to remember how to do our job, so we're really thrilled to have you here. We will figure it out, I'm sure, unless we get fired. Hopefully not. But in the meantime, it is a lot going on, y'all. I'm sure you've already noticed. Hopefully you took a little bit of a break for the holidays like we did, but we took that so we can come back refreshed and focused and ready to go back to fight for our country, fight for our nation, and of course, fight for the VoteVets priorities of our national security, our veterans, our military members, our family members. All those things matter, and all of them face challenges as we go into the new year, the new administration, the new Congress. Obviously, Donald Trump is going to be the president here in January 20th, a little over a week away. The Congress will be controlled by both the Republicans in both houses. We're gearing up for nominations. We're gearing up for policy fights. All that's coming in. So all that comes in the backdrop as, well, what we're just talking about. Pete Hegseth, these are the first nominees to face his nomination confirmation hearing. That'll be this Tuesday, y'all, just a few days away. Pete Hegseth will be going in there. It is going to be a very contentious one. While Senator Thune has been telling the president-elect that he thinks he has enough votes. On the other hand, a lot of Democrats are raising concerns. There are reports now coming out that actually many of them are thinking it's going to be a fight just at the confirmation hearing for him. So we can expect a lot more. The timing is amazing. The timing of that position, his nomination, many of his personal positions and policies couldn't be a better time than now. He's got very unusual things he's been saying over and over for many years, and his timing works out fine. Just today, military.com ran this article talking about a surge of female enlistments, which helped the Army drive their recruiting success and reach their 2024 recruiting goals. This is fascinating timing. Nearly 10,000 women signed up for active duty Army in 2024. That's an 18% jump from the previous year, 2023, while male recruitment increased by about just 8%, the data shows. This hike comes as the service continues to struggle with recruiting men. They're less likely, and the reason they've gotten so many women, and women are coming in easier in the military today, and we need them, is statistically, through research, we found that women are less likely to have criminal records, accounting for just 30% of juvenile arrests, according to data from the Justice Department. They're also outpacing men in higher education, with nearly half of women aged 25 to 34 holding bachelor's degrees, compared to just 37% of men, according to Pew Research. All these things mean that thanks to women joining our military and stepping up to volunteer, we have actually got an increase. Since 2013, male enlistments, though, have dropped by 22%, from 58,000 men a year to just 45,000 last year. So this increase in female recruits comes despite the Army, ironically, not having changed anything to seek them out. Its recruiting strategy still is mostly focused on men, focused on male figures in their commercials and everything. But the fact is, women are stepping up to serve, even as Pete Hegseth himself, who wants to be Secretary of Defense, has said multiple times, women don't belong in combat. So we've got a lot to talk about with this nomination. It's the first of many challenges they'll be facing. It's the first of many challenges we'll be facing with VoteVets. For those who aren't paying attention, 31 states will be having elections in 2025. That's before the midterms of 2026. We're talking 2025. With key elections and mayoral races across the country. And of course, Virginia and New Jersey will have gubernatorial races. There's a lot going on politically in the next 2 years, and we're going to be in the middle of it. But let's start off with these nominations and the kind of policies we expect to see from the Trump administration. For our first show of 2025, I'm thrilled to have our senior advisors, former Congressman and Army veteran Max Rose, and our incredible leader and, of course, former General Officer, Major General retired Paul Eaton, discuss what we face with this coming nomination battle for Pete Hegseth and more. Gentlemen, good to see you in 2025. Welcome back to the show. It's
good to see you too.
Great to be here. Good to see you.
So I think, Paul, you just came off NBC, as a matter of fact, talking about Pete Hegseth. Paul, you're a retired Major General. You're our senior advisor. Let's just start, I guess, in the big picture. What's your biggest concern? I mean, what concerns you the most about that specific nomination?
Well, Fred, one of the things that allows our soldiers, sailors, Marine airmen to do the wonderful things, amazing things they do, is they have faith in the chain of command. That includes our civilian chain of command. Yeah. And the image of Pete Hegseth walking into the tank in front of our 4-star leadership, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, and sitting down, and the lack of gravitas that we have in this case is stunning. And they'll look at his credentials. What has he done to earn the case that he be Secretary of Defense? What does he have that might look like Chuck Hagel or Bob Gates or any of the amazing secretaries of defense that we've had? And you don't find anything. I've known a lot of wonderful majors. Majors are great at the transition from tactical to operational warfare. The idea of running a bureaucracy like the 2.8 million people in the Pentagon, a budget north of $800 billion, an outfit that has yet to pass a comprehensive audit on how we conduct business in the Pentagon. This is a stunningly complex organization. And he just does not have the credentials to do his job as the leader of the armed forces, of the leader of the free world.
Yeah, I'd actually say the same thing, Max. I mean, what do you kind of see it the same way? And you are an officer. You've been an officer in the Army. I mean, a junior officer like me, or a mid-grade, field grade officer. I mean, what's your perspective on that from our level of rank?
Yeah, I mean, I think, look, from a political standpoint, it's important that we respect the fact that Donald Trump won a slight margin in the presidential election, and he is the incoming legitimate president with the right to nominate his own cabinet secretaries. And it's likely at this point that the Republican Senate will act as Donald Trump's fully owned subsidiary, relinquish their constitutional duties, and do whatever the hell Donald Trump tells them to do. So let's for a moment act as if what Pete Hegseth wants to happen happens.
Yeah.
There is not in the history of modern day politics been a Secretary of Defense nominee who has talked less about warfighting, less about military power, less about serious military affairs. Rather, what Pete Hegseth is through and through is a culture warrior. Ironically, he claims that DEI is the problem. He claims the Army has become, or the military has become, too culturally focused, and the guy only talks about the things he hates. He only talks about the fact that he hates women in combat. He hates diversity training. We can talk for ad infinitum about how he's wrong about that, but I have yet to hear any legitimate point from him about military power. That means that he'll be able to protect the homeland and project military power in a responsible way on day one. And that, to me, is an enormous problem.
Yeah, it's a shocking how that's not been a conversation, even as we've heard these conversations from Donald J. Trump. We could jump right to that. I mean, as you said earlier, I mean, talk about Greenland and the Panama Canal being taken back. And even I think I saw a story about they're discussing how much of Mexico they can evade and get away with it, taking on Canada. But you're right. We have not seen any of those conversations from Hegseth. He hasn't answered those questions at all. I mean, What are you thinking there, Max?
No, I really hope that a senator asks Pete Hegseth how in God's name we can take land that people do not want to give to us for free and do so in either a fiscally conservative or isolationist manner. Right. I don't understand how you can do that. Right. And so these folks ran for office as isolationist peaceniks who were going to focus on the homeland and address cost of living. And the first thing that they're talking about doing is acquiring Canada, the Panama Canal, and Greenland, either by force or by purchase. I don't know how that affects the cost of milk.
It doesn't quite do. Paul, you've worked with our NATO allies. You and I have worked with them in Iraq. I mean, Greenland belongs to a NATO ally. I mean, Canada is a NATO ally. I mean, it's ludicrous. And I would think the Secretary of Defense nominee has to answer for that, doesn't he?
Well, Greenland is a very important geopolitical island in the North Atlantic.
Yeah.
Denmark is very competent as an armed force. They're not a huge country, but they punch way above their weight. And they have made Greenland very available to the NATO nations that collaborate with them, to include the United States. So if we own something, we have to defend it. The idea of having to defend Greenland from whatever Russian opportunistic operator may be out there, the Danes have been extremely generous in making available terrain in Greenland to support our various space activities, our submarine activities that we conduct out there. We're beyond words that we would have to own Greenland to make it work for our national security affairs.
Yeah, and
but to that point, General, let's say Denmark has not to this point said that they'd love to sell it to us. So that conceivably involves the use of military force, something that Donald Trump has not explicitly not taken off the table. In your mind, is that a responsible deployment of military power? I can't understand this.
Absolutely not. And one of the reasons, if we're talking about Greenland, we probably ought to talk about the Panama Canal. One of the reasons that President Carter engineered the transfer of the Panama Canal to Panama was the United States military told him it would be extraordinarily difficult to defend, would cost us a reinforced U.S. Corps, better than 100,000 men, to safeguard the Panama Canal. So back to, if you own it, you have to defend it. We have this organization called NATO that's expanded a little bit under the Biden administration, and we love it that way. The collaborative nature of NATO simply makes Greenland available to the alliance to do what we need to do.
Yeah, which tells you has nothing to do with the security at all, but possibly the supposed wealth of minerals and others. So, and that's just one of the main things you have to. I mean, the one things we talked about a lot is that, as we mentioned, the opening part of the story, the show, is that Hegseth has made repeated statements about women's place in the armed forces. He's been very clear. He doesn't believe they should be in combat roles. Actually, he was very clear, often saying they shouldn't be in the military, but he's kind of caveated that now, saying combat roles. And as he's getting beat up about it, keeps being bad. They're the ones currently, as you saw in the opening, that women are saving the military, are integral to our service. Max, you serve next to women right now. I'm sure you served not more than a few years ago. How ludicrous is the idea? I mean, can we even run an army without women at this point?
No, look, I don't support a military, and this is the same answer that I have in regards to the transgender issue.
Yeah,
I don't support lowering standards to the extent that it puts service members in harm's way.
Sure.
Or diminishes our capacity to accomplish the mission. Once that box is checked, God bless. If you want to be a part of our force, we welcome you with open arms. I think that's point number one. Point number two, though, and we could talk about this through a myriad of different lenses, diversity is a strength when it comes to modern day combat. We're a long way from World War I. Modern day combat is multidimensional, using significant technologies that are rapidly changing. There's a significant cultural and socio-political element to most elements of combat in this day and age. And the lowest level leaders are strategic leaders. That their actions can have geopolitical implications. So what that means is that we need active, clear thinkers on the ground that benefit from those to the left and right of them. So diversity is a real strength. The other thing, though, is that trust is a real strength, not divisiveness. So whenever people talk about diversity training, whenever people talk about cultural training, in some ways it needs to be rebranded as trust building. You can't have trust without understanding. And I just think that this is, again, it goes back to the ways in which Pete Hegseth looks at the military is a tool for the advancement of Donald Trump's political rhetoric, not a medium by which he can protect and defend the homeland and project America's interests abroad.
And America's interests abroad do go to the safety of those service members and the people we serve, including our allies in combat. You know, one of the most horrifying things I watched unfold with Pete Hegseth in the past during the first Trump administration was his open support for the pardoning and support for war criminals. I think you've been talking about a lot about that lately, Paul, even on TV. For those who, I think probably some of our viewers may not be familiar with Hegseth's support for war criminals, and when I say that, folks, I mean no kidding. He's gone to bat for war criminals who were convicted of murdering local civilians, breaking the trust of their partners. I mean, Paul, can you tell our readers a little bit about what his history there and why that's so horrifying, so people understand why that makes professionals like us so upset?
Well, I'm aware of 3 particular cases: Eddie Gallagher, Lawrence, and one other Army major. These are men had been investigated and found, in fact, that they had done the criminal activity that they were found guilty of. And I go back to something that happened to me during the election of President Obama. And in the lead up to that, a lot of retired generals and admirals participated in briefings to explain to candidates why we should not torture the men and sometimes women we capture, that we conduct investigations with the basis of the investigation is the Army Manual for Interrogation. And that activity made a huge difference. And here we have a Secretary of Defense who wants to toss all that. And I don't know, maybe he wants to go back to the black site CIA interrogation facilities that caused us so many problems. Perhaps he wants to go back to the standards that gave us Abu Ghraib when, in the case, I was in Iraq when that happened. And when the story broke, my senior Iraqi advisor, a retired general under Saddam's armed forces, came into my office and said, "General, you have no idea how badly this is playing on the Arab street." And that right there took the moral high ground of me and all the other people working to develop the Iraqi armed forces, that the bright and shining jewel of the United States system is our judicial system and how we manage the good order and discipline of our armed forces and enforce the laws of land warfare. So that particular aspect of Mr. Hegseth is damning.
It really is, especially, you know, Max, you served downrange, and I did. I actually followed you and your command, General Eaton, training the Iraqi security forces, putting my life in their hands. There are days that the only people I was hanging out with were Iraqi, and when they find out when they're armed and they had every reason they could, there was my life was in their hands. I know, Max, you probably experienced that at some point too.
Absolutely.
Yeah, how shocking it is to have these conversations with them about, you know, war criminals like these guys are. I mean, I'm sure you have a similar
experience. Totally. No, I mean, I think that there's a connecting narrative to all of this. Yeah. Right. To Greenland, Panama Canal, women in combat, DEI, whether or not we believe in war criminals or that we think we should protect war criminals. The connecting link to all of this is a fundamental difference in what we think represents the underpinning of an effective and lethal military in the 2020s and 2030s and beyond. Mm-hmm. And it is I don't want to speak for anyone else, but it is my fundamental belief, and I think what we've learned from 20 years of combat represents that diversity is a strength that makes us more of a lethal force, not deploying our service members unless it is a matter of national security, and that there's no way, shape, or form that we can fight by, with, and through our local partners if we are committing war crimes and defending those who commit war crimes. You know, again, Donald Trump, right, said, I don't like war, but he wants to project American power. There's only one way to do that. That's with fighting by, with, and through partners.
Yeah.
You're not going to ever be able to do something like that if they think that you are inhumane, if you commit war crimes and defend those who commit war crimes. And so I think that it's absolutely vital, and I hope some senators do this. Just lay out the contradictions, right? Let's not argue with the goals that they set out, which are noble goals. They want peace, and they want to address the debt. They don't want service members dying unnecessarily. They want a strong military. That's what he said. That's what he ran on. God bless. Democrats should probably run on some of that stuff too. But the things now that they're talking about doing directly contradict with those goals. And they should hit them on the head with that point over and over and over again.
Absolutely.
And Paul, I mean, what's the kind of questions you'd urge these senators to ask? I mean, as they're sitting here this weekend contemplating what they're going to do, hopefully the Democratic senators are coordinating and have a plan. I mean, what do you think? Like, what would you pin Pete Hegseth to his chair in that room to answer for?
Great question. Question number one, Mr. Hegseth, thank you very much for appearing before the committee. Now, the job you want, the job you've been nominated for, is a remarkably difficult job. You can only watch how people age, and Lloyd Austin is a great example. A wonderful human being, great leader, and nonetheless, he's got more gray hair than he used to, and it's because it's a hard job. Please lay out your credentials for this job. Just tell me your credentials. Let's see what you have, and we'll discuss each one by one. You were a good major. You were successful up to that point. You were a good host on Fox News, we assume, because you're still employed by Fox News on the weekends. And it's an easy thing. Lay out your credentials. And is there anything in your past that that might make women hesitant to follow you? Notably, your comment that we shouldn't have women in combat.
Yeah,
that right there. I think the commanding general of Southcom is a 4-star female aviator.
she is.
With multiple combat tours.
Good friend of mine.
General Richardson might say, Mr. Hegseth, could we talk about? It'd be an easy kill.
Yeah. Laura and I were served together as second lieutenants in Korea in 1988. That's how.
Wow.
Yeah, and I'm hosting a podcast, and she's a 4-star general. We won't discuss that, But she's doing that because she's a remarkable soldier. She led troops in combat, the invasion of Iraq. She led them several more times. She's earned her stripes. She led air assaults. I was her backup in air assaults numerous times in Iraq. I mean, she's a remarkable combat leader who earned her stripes. And by the way, she did that as lieutenant colonel, where Pete topped out as a major. What about you, Max? If you're in House, of course, but you talk to your Senate colleagues, and maybe you are talking to Senate colleagues, what are the kind of bugs you want to put in their ear to really be pulling out of him that he has to answer for to hold his feet to the fire?
Yeah, I mean, I think what I would say is, do you think it's a priority to make up military plans to take Greenland and take Panama Canal? Do you think it's important to make up to make sure that we refine, update our military plans to take Canada by military force? The president has clearly established these as a priority. They were not priorities in the last 50 years, 100 years. They just weren't. So I think we would all collectively agree that there is no updated plan to do so. So do you think it's a priority?
It's about like 1780, probably.
Yeah, right. So I think that would naturally jam him up.
Yeah.
Right? Because what do you say to that? right? That's point number one. Point number two is, does he, I really want to get to the bottom, truly, of what he thinks lies in a cohesive unit and how trust building and diversity building is associated with that. I think that's really important.
Yeah. And as the head of the UCMJ, I mean, at the end, he sits at the top of the Uniform Code of Military Justice. He will make decisions on who stays and who goes. He'll be part of the decisions on who gets promoted and who doesn't. I mean, Paul, do you think there's any way possibly? I mean, the good Congressman Ryan said at the top that we need an apolitical or non-political person. I can't imagine a scenario where Pete Hegseth isn't going to consider wokeness or policy when he looks at these promotions that are coming his way in the next 4 years, will he?
Fred, indeed, you have to ask those questions and force them to answer. Yeah. And if Senator Duckworth is asking questions, I suspect that it would be a very difficult time for Mr. Hegseth.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's the question will be: will it turn enough Republican senators in the meantime to step away from it? And I mean, he has talked about removing women. He's talked about LGBTQ from our force. He's talked about all these different things. I mean, the thing about Hegseth is because he is a TV host, all these things are on camera. There's no, you can't run from, you can't say, oh, the mainstream. I loved it when he was getting attacked earlier. Oh, the mainstream media is like, bro, you said these things. Here's a video of you saying these things. It's kind of hard to run. I hope they're prepared. Are you getting a sense of that, Max? I don't know if you have a chance to talk to any of your colleagues that are still serving. Are you getting a sense for the Hill at all in your conversations with your colleagues, former colleagues?
The principal thing that I'm getting a sense from everybody on the Hill in regards to Pete Hegseth is that he's woefully unqualified.
Yeah.
And the general made this point right at the jump, and that's, I think, the most important point here, that the Secretary of Defense is not meant to be a political warrior. It just isn't. It is, unlike most other secretary or cabinet positions, it is a deeply operational role that is featured in the military chain of command, that has the authority to approve missions, for instance. I mean, we are not talking about someone, let's not play any games, right? There are folks, when you are a president, a governor, a mayor, a congressperson, a senator, there are folks that you want to bring on your government staff that are your political people, that are looking at polls, that are considering the next election. You can't take the politics out of politics. So let's not be naive. But that shouldn't be in the Pentagon. And that's what this is. This is someone who's going to say, what are they talking about on Fox News, and how do I translate that into my activity here as the leader of the Defense Department? That's what's so dangerous about this. And we actually haven't had that. It doesn't mean that there aren't divisions and very vibrant debates about what the Secretary of Defense should be doing. Small military, big military, go to Iraq, don't go to Iraq, leave Afghanistan, don't leave Afghanistan. These are all very huge, monumental questions that are the province of a Secretary of Defense. But it shouldn't be, oh, wow, Fox News is talking more about DEI. This is trending on X. Let me make sure that I'm doing something here that really stokes the flames and riles up our base so that we can keep the MAGA train show going. Yeah. This is too dangerous. And that's where his head is at.
Yeah. I mean, getting guidance from Cat Turd and Elon on Twitter is a terrifying thought for the Secretary of Defense, and we've seen that already. I think shifting that conversation too is, and we've really spent a lot of time on Hegseth this first half hour, but he's not the only one, right? That we've got a whole cavalcade of unqualified people, Kash Patel, Dr. Oz. And of course, I know, Paul, you've been talking a little bit about Tulsi Gabbard's qualifications. I think we have a statement you put out, Paul. JJ, why don't you show that? Talk about putting Tulsi Gabbard in charge of our intelligence. It's a ridiculous thing. I mean, tell us a little bit about why she's as wholly unqualified as Hegseth to be the director of national intelligence too.
We don't know who she is anymore.
Okay.
In the beginning, she was a former active duty Army officer in intelligence branch, I believe, and then went into the reserve component. She served in Congress, and we had a pretty good idea what she was about, who she was. But in the years since, there are a terrific number of questions that are brought to bear. Why was she so keen on supporting Russian civilian leadership, Mr. Putin? Why did she go to Syria? What were the outcomes of these particular activities, and what drove her to do it to begin with? What with all the smoke, and there's probably fire, I don't know, but what's with all the smoke, and how are the Five Eyes, the Brits and the Australians, New Zealanders, Canadians, what are they going to say when it comes time to collaborate with intelligence services that they have? And believe me, the intelligence services that the Five Eyes have, that our NATO members have, are terrific. It would be a blinding event for the United States intel system to be denied access to what all those other intelligence services come up with. And that's the worst possible outcome I see with this particular nomination.
Yeah, she served as I guess she was in medical corps for a while in the National Guard. Then I think she actually branched military police. So she actually hasn't even served in intelligence, and now she serves in the reserve role as a civil affairs person. So she's never actually even served in the intelligence community in any way at all. I mean, Max. I mean, I know you probably had hair in the last few months. You know, I mean, you pull, if you had hair, you pull it out, right? And Tulsi's another unique case of someone who's wholly unqualified to be elevated to these. I mean, you think about you guys. I'd like to think I'm young, but when I was young, when I was those people's age, the idea of being elevated to a cabinet level position, you know, I would have laughed myself if somebody called me. I mean, Max, how do you think they take calls? You know.
Man, I think Pete Hegseth is a much more dangerous nomination than Tulsi Gabbard. I think Kash Patel, at least in his Trump iteration of Kash Patel, you know, Kash Patel worked for Barack Obama, and it was a different Kash Patel. I think he is more dangerous. I think nominating people to be Secretary of the Navy who've never been on a ship that has a gun on it and they've been on yachts because they're rich, I think that's dangerous. You know, in our critiques of Tulsi and my critiques of Tulsi, what I have focused on is the fact that when Tulsi switched from being a Democrat to a Republican, she did so because she said the Republicans are the party of no war. They're the party that wants peace. And nonetheless, what we have seen from MAGA before even inauguration is alienating all of our, or many of our alliances, threatening annexation by force. That does not seem to me to be the party of peace. That's my issue with Tulsi, and that's where I think the Democrats should be operating. I think it's a little dangerous to assert that someone who is currently a lieutenant colonel in the Army Reserves is a Russian agent, because that then means that the Army Reserves is cool with, doesn't really have that good of a vetting process. But philosophically, I think she made a monumental mistake switching from Democrat to Republican, and I think she's going to come to regret it, because every single thing that this administration is set to do from a foreign policy basis, economically or militarily or diplomatically, makes it more likely that we go to war, makes it more likely that we send our men and women into harm's way.
That's incredibly dangerous. I mean, you serve the higher ranks, Paul. I mean, you serve now. You're a policy advisor to administrations, and of course for us. I mean, I think you probably see it the same way, that there are political layers of this that are incredibly dangerous as well, aren't there? We lost. You're muted, Paul. There you are, sir.
Sorry. It's a confidence game.
Okay.
From an international perspective, and the relationships that we develop with armies that are either allied to us or potentially friendly to us. And if they look at our senior civil military relations and our civilian leadership, And if they don't have the trust and confidence in those particular leaders, you're not going to have the reliance on the U.S. military and the U.S. Alliance to get done in the foreign policy arena.
Yeah, that lays down right there, and we have to have that trust. We have to have that powerful partners, and all these nominations are right. But there's actually more. Now I want to switch that before we close the show out. We know that the Project 2025 policies. I mean, they've denied that Project 2025 is a thing, but yet the policies we have heard floating look a lot like. I think we have a list, a graphic we did about Project 2025. JJ could throw up for us. I think as we look even beyond the nominees, we have to look at what we may face for VoteVets, for our community of veterans, for our community of national security professionals, our supporters, these kind of things. I mean, as you look at that list, Max, I mean, you've kind of said a few of them in our conversation already. I mean, as you look at that, what are the things you're going to keep an eye out for?
The deployment of U.S. troops domestically.
Yeah.
And I also think that we have to consider how that relates not just to the Insurrection Act, but to immigration. There's a long-held history of the United States military deploying along the southern border and the northern border. Generally, I'm sure you've been involved with some of those operations or at least seen them. But that's a long cry from weaponizing or utilizing our men and women in uniform to conduct raids domestically, to manage camps, to do the things that will be necessary in order, again, for them to execute on their promise of deporting millions of people. And that's what they ran on. That's what they promised. So, we're all in some way, shape, and form on this call operational logisticians, right? Like, what's the old quote? Amateurs talk strategy, experts talk logistics.
Correct.
Well, let's talk. Let's talk as experts. If we were sitting down and planning, how do you deport 10 million people? There's no way to do it without utilizing the only federal agency that is operational, the United States military.
Yeah.
And that is not their constitutional duty.
Yeah.
And we have to work out for that.
That's a dangerous slippery slope for our policy and for our troops. And one of the things I talk about a lot, Paul, as you look at this list, and we've talked about here at VoteVets quite a bit, and you just kind of hit on it, Max, is it's not our constitutional duty. It's not in their thing. One of the things I talk about a lot, Paul, I think you'll appreciate this because you had such a long career and you served in such challenging times throughout your career, is something I say a lot. And I hope especially our civilian viewers understand, is that when you impact the military today, when you hurt recruiting, when you good people leave, like the really good young officers are going to leave instead of being part of a politicized organization, that doesn't just affect our national security for just the 4 years of Donald J. Trump, does it?
So every time you use the military for a non-combat focus, there's a cost associated with training and with retention. And I think every soldier will tell you that I was the ops officer for Hurricane Andrew relief. Yeah. And I will tell you that the soldiers loved it. And we were down there for 6 weeks. We helped a lot of people. We probably saved a lot of lives. The Great Yellowstone Firefight back in the 80s, I was involved with that. Now, those are operations that we have excess capacity. We apply it. We help save Americans. We help ensure that Americans can survive the event. But there is a cost in terms of training and operational readiness to do our primary mission. And along that line, and one of the real dangers associated with this Project 2025 are the purity boards that they threaten to assemble retired officers, and there are enough. We saw 124 generals and admirals sign on to a letter that said the election was not a true election when we elected President Biden, and also challenged President Biden's capacity to serve. So there are retired generals and admirals who would love to support the Trump agenda. I regret having to say that, but they're out there, and they would love to sit these purity boards that will get after this attack on DEI, the attack on being able to operate in an inclusive manner with men and women, and the whole inclusivity that we've been addressing since we integrated our armed forces back in the 40s. So purity boards are the biggest danger, the biggest threat to the good order and discipline of the armed forces, and this is something that we really need to attack.
Yeah, and like I said, it takes 30 years to make a general, right? It takes 28 years to make a command sergeant major. The decisions we make now, when some wonderful young officers and non-commissioned officers who are now in their 20s, in their 5th or 6th year of service, obviously most young officers have a 4 or 5, 6 year commitment. They get commissioned. That's a big key decision point for them. Does it ever worry you, Max, that they're going to make the key decision seeing purity boards or seeing us used for, getting that it's going to mean 25 years from now, we won't have those good men and women as generals, will we?
I don't know. I mean, I have such confidence in people's ability to persevere when they have a love of the military and a desire to serve, that I'm not going to go that far. I just think too highly of those folks serving. But what I do know is that, and this is probably already happening, and generally is a much better authority on this. I do know that generals now and colonels, senior level leaders, and actually below, like colonels and even below, are watching their back in a way that they haven't now, are considering a whole new layer of the world that they were not previously considering. And I do think that has an effect on the mission. Everyone has a predetermined level of cognitive bandwidth. And one of the things that the military does so well is you kind of build up this institution where people can forget about a whole series of things so they can focus on the mission. And politics is one of those things that they're supposed to forget about.
Yeah.
Congressman,
I worry that this impacts the mission.
What you just keyed in on is absolutely correct. Trusting left and right, being able to say what's really on your mind. When we were going through the whole removal of don't ask, don't tell as a policy for gender management in the armed forces, sexual orientation management, the coming out of the Marine Corps, I believe it was General Amos at the time, when asked the question, said, no, we should keep don't ask, don't tell as a means of dealing with the issue. And a lot of people came back and said, shouldn't we fire the Commandant of the Marine Corps after he laid this out? And my comment back was, no. At the 4-star level, you're at the interface between policymakers and policy execution. When a 4-star or a command sergeant major is asked the question, he is legally obligated to speak his mind and to give actually the answer that he has, and that he will trust the system to manage the issue without cutting him off at the knees. So this purity board business, we don't want political commissars that ruined the Soviet army before World War II. We don't want political commissars to trigger mass executions that Stalin performed at the beginning days of World War II. The Russian army is still feeling the effects of that particular policy, still feeling. What we witness in Ukraine, a serious implication of ages past that Stalin applied.
Absolutely. And just another point here, which I think is so critical. There are military officers today that are really concerned about what they said 10 years ago, when people were first starting to consider diversity, equity, and inclusion through the lens of military force and effectiveness. And people published papers, people spoke publicly about it, because this was a matter of military operations, and that's amongst the duty and responsibilities and obligations of senior military leaders.
Yeah.
They're now concerned that things that they said 10 years ago are going to impact them negatively today because they're still serving. So that's negative one, because those people are unnecessarily anxious and nervous, and it's less likely they can do it hurts their ability to do their job effectively. I don't want to say they can't, but it hurts it. But what it's also the larger, more macro impact is that people writ large, or just generals and military leaders, are going to be writ large just afraid to say anything.
Yeah.
Just afraid to offer their opinion on anything, because it could bite them in the ass today or in an unforeseen way a decade from now. That's really dangerous, because it completely eliminates a pillar of the importance of senior military leadership. The whole difference between senior military leadership and junior military leadership is that their strategic opinion matters.
Yeah.
And we're completely taking that off the board. That's the Russian military right there. What I just described is the Russian military. And look how well that's going for them.
Or the Iraqi right before we took them down. It's every army we've ever defeated, right? We do that. That's why we were able to defeat them, because our junior leaders are able to make the key decisions and implement their tactics and strategy the way they are. What do we used to call it, sir? The strategic corporal, right? And you're right.
When we look at the Wehrmacht and its prowess during World War II, the German army empowered the non-commissioned officer, and instead of dealing with a platoon, you were dealing with 3 squads independently operating, and the Wehrmacht was a very dangerous instrument because of what you just described.
Well, this has been a very upbeat show, but we're back, and we got a lot of serious issues to face. We've had a wonderful group of folks commenting and asking questions. Any last thoughts before I let you gentlemen go? Max, go.
No, listen, great to see you. This was many more to come. Happy New Year.
Likewise, great to have you back. It's good to be in the fight with you too, sir. What about you, Paul? What do you want to do?
Fred, I love the focus that you started off with, that we stay focused on policy and how that might affect the folks that we're going to put into high office. And at the same time, we're able to coach the very senior leadership, the elected president of the United States, and help shape a successful use of our great men and women in all branches of government, in all departments. And to the Senate, you've got your work cut out for you, and whatever we can do to help you pick the right people, we're on board. And Fred, what you're doing right now, Congressman, what you're doing right now, great work. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. Appreciate you joining us on short notice. We will see you again next week. I'm sure we're going to have a lot to talk about next time I bring you on after these hearings. So thank you very much. You guys have a great night, great weekend.
Roger. Be well.
Likewise. Well, great conversation. We appreciate you, so many of you, joining us on our first show back in 2025. Look, we're going to have a lot more shows, okay? We're going to be talking. I imagine you'll see me and JJ and a guest back Tuesday night after the Pete Hegseth nomination. Talk about what happened that day as it unfolds. If you were with us last year, we had 57,000 of you join us for our debate night talk. So we would love to have you tell your friends about the show, the Online with VoteVets. The very best way to track Online with VoteVets is a very simple one. Surf on over to YouTube, no matter where you're watching us right now, be it Facebook or LinkedIn or Twitter or whatever you are. I would love you to go to YouTube, go to the VoteVets YouTube channel. I'd like you to click on that subscribe button. Look, you want to get fancy, hit that little bell next to it, and you'll get notified every time we go live or have a show. We've got a lot of videos coming out. Look, we're going to be very active, you guys. You can see the kind of issues we're dealing with. You look at that list of just the Project 2025 one. There's a lot more out there. You notice they didn't talk about Project 2025 invading Greenland, yet here we are. So as you can see, we're going to need you, our dedicated supporters. I hope you will support VoteVets. The easy way to do that is obviously to donate. I'm going to be honest. Go to our website. I think we have a thing. If you go to our website, there's 2 really key buttons on our website I'd love you to go to. VoteVets.org. There's one, of course, our donate button. We are a nonprofit organization. We do like you survive on your donations. That'd be key. But even more importantly, there's a Get Involved button. And the Get Involved button means you click on there and you can find out the Take Action. It says Take Action. The Take Action button means you'll be able to sign up for our email list. We can reach out to you if we need you. Maybe you want to participate in one of our events. We actually have events. I participated in a fly-in 2 years ago about supporting our allies in Ukraine. There's a lot of ways you can actually get involved in VoteVets. And by the way, you don't actually have to be a veteran. I know a lot of you are not. You're civilians. Our real hope is for you to be partners with us. There's only 16 million living veterans in America, ladies and gentlemen. 16 million out of the 330 million plus Americans are veterans, and many of us are passing as we get old. Many of us are getting old like me. And so we need you as our allies, our partners. You don't have to be a veteran to join VoteVets, okay? I can't say that enough. To donate, to take action, we need you to be part of that. Finally, before we go away, I want to do a very important thing. As you know, there's a terrible disaster unfolding as we speak in Los Angeles. I want to give you two key organizations. I was a veterans advocate for many years, as I'm sure you know. One of my partner organizations actually was a client, full disclosure, is US Vets. US Vets are one of the leading organizations in the country for homeless veterans and support of veterans, especially in Los Angeles. They actually have facilities right there on the Los Angeles VA campus. US Vets has posted, if you are a veteran who's been displaced by the Los Angeles wildfires and you need help, please call their number, 213-500-1319. In addition, that's the US Vets. It's a nonprofit. You can call them at 215-500-1319. US Vets wants to help you if you are a veteran been displaced. As well, Secretary McDonough, the current VA secretary for all 4 years of the Biden administration, did an announcement yesterday saying that the VA is standing by to help veterans who are in need in Los Angeles who've been affected by the disaster. This means maybe your health care has been affected, maybe your health is affected because of the smoke, whatever your reasoning may be. Just call 1-800-MY-VA-411. That number's on the screen. If you want to call the VA for help, you don't necessarily have to be enrolled. They will help veterans of all types. That's 1-800-MY-VA-411. There's a disaster relief area. There's also a disaster relief area on the VA's website. Please use those resources. If you have friends and family or veterans, I urge you to reach out to them, check on them. I've got a lot of friends in the disaster zone. These are the two wonderful organizations willing to help our veterans. In the meantime, as I mentioned, I am Fred Wellman, retired Lieutenant Colonel of the United States Army, the host of Online with VoteVets. You'll see us here twice a week, probably. I look forward to you joining us. Again, subscribe, follow our social media. We so appreciate your support for VoteVets and our mission. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us, and we will see you again next week.